was a typo, and I'm like, welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared. I'm here with Robert and Jay Heat. What's up, gentlemen?
Yo!
Flame on. How's everybody doing tonight, man? It's been a while since I've been on a UTC episode.
Yeah, I know. So today we are discussing the X-Men, and so this is one of those IPs that it first off, it was like the biggest Marvel IP in like I think of the 80s with like Claremont and all that stuff. That was like its first peak. Like,
but yeah, beforehand, the big names of Marvel were Spider-Man and the Thing.
Yeah.
After the 80s, Wolverine replaced the Thing.
Yeah, and the thing I was trying to get to is the fact that they were the book that got canceled originally, but Len Wein wanted to relaunch it with like an all international cast. So
it's woke.
Yeah, I know. So then this is where you get like Storm and like
Wolverine
and Wolverine and everything like that. And that was like the biggest, like that was like the best X-Men team in a while. Then Claremont left, and you had kind of a period where the X-Men were kind of off and on. I would argue they never got back that hype that they had under Claremont.
No, they tried. I would say the closest they got was Age of Apocalypse.
They tried to. It's just the problem is you never had, since like Claremont, the like single creative vision that you had.
No, you did not. Because Claremont, you had him, you had Louise Simonson, and a few others involved, and Fabian Nicieza. And then Fabian was the only one who really stuck around afterwards.
What about you, Jay Heat? What do you think?
I agree, but this But, contrary to popular, am I lagging?
No, you're not.
Okay, I thought I had some interference going on. Thank you. But say what you will about nowadays, but this was a time, late 80s, early 90s, where, well, really all the 80s, if we're being honest, where X-Men, Teen Titans, and to an extent Doom Patrol were the trifecta of that generation, constantly back and forth competing for the top spots in sales.
Yeah, exactly. And so X-Men kind of goes through a little period. Then you get like the eras, which are essentially like the
First you get the right beforehand, you had the worst of the post Claremont era, which was the Chuck Austin era.
Yep.
Actually, no.
Yep.
Wait, no. Chuck Austin was after Morrison came on. So right beforehand, you had the they decided, let's try and get, once Morrison was coming on, they decided, okay, let's resolve some stuff. Let's resolve the legacy virus, among other things. Morrison, it was the shot in the arm that was needed until his run ended, and it almost derailed everything.
Yeah, by the way, the Morrison era is where we finally get Emma Frost joining the X-Men, because she had been...
You know why, though? You want to know why?
Why?
Because they killed off Colossus.
That's why they made Emma Frost an X-Men?
And made her Diamond, because they needed someone to fill in the void, so he brought her in and made her Diamond.
Well, that worked. But the point is, like, previous to that, she wasn't a villain anymore, but she wasn't an X-Men. This actually made her an X-Men.
Generation X.
Okay.
She was a teacher still, so she was still there. In fact, that's why she was on Genosha. She was teaching there.
No, I know, but I said she wasn't a villain.
No. She had not been a villain for ages.
Yeah, they undid that a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. What's up, Jay Heat?
I'm sorry. Contrary to excuse me. Based on what Robert was saying, Emma Frost was technically in an anti-hero phase throughout, like post Claremont, and a good chunk of the 90s. By the time Morrison's run rolled around, she was an anti-hero for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
At least 5 years.
Yeah. In fact, I think she hadn't. The most she ever was a hero was Dark Phoenix, I think. I don't remember how much longer she really was a villain, to be honest. Yeah, Mystique was more of a regular villain than Emma ever was.
Yeah. And okay, so Tevia asked the question, wasn't the Morrison run also controversial? Yes,
The ending mostly the ending.
Mostly the ending. So Robert, explain for the people how it ended.
Okay, first of all, love Morrison as much as you want. One thing he and Mark Waid had in common is they looked at two villains that, ironically enough, Byrne was involved in expanding both of them, with Magneto and Doctor Doom. Ignored all of their character growth and wanted to revert them back to how they were at the beginning. And thus, in Morrison's case, he decided to have it be, turns out Magneto survived Genosha, disguised himself as Zorn, then decided to try and take over Manhattan. And he took the Jewish man who survived the World War II and made him create concentration camps for humans.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That definitely is not insensitive at all.
And then he killed off Jean, and this was her first actual death. Jean never died until this point, despite what people think. She never actually died until Morrison killed her off.
No, okay. This is a common misconception made by X-Men 92, X-Men the animated series. But in the source material, Jean Grey didn't die in the Phoenix Saga. She survived the ordeal because the Phoenix intervened and used her as a vessel.
And replaced her. And replaced her. Used a
Well, it doesn't help that you have the X-Men bring up like maybe Jean would approve if she were not if she would be alive for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, they've taken that, but again, the funny thing is, she didn't die even during Dark Phoenix. That was just a Phoenix in a copy.
No, but I know it's just
never understood that.
But when you have also the writers reiterating these points, it's like
definitely.
Yeah.
But like I said, immediately after Morrison was done, they undid it. They had Claremont do new Excalibur and reveal, oh no, Magneto's still a bit on Genosha.
Robert, you're going in and out, buddy.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You're going in and out.
Something like that. Well, Xavier, you have been. Do you think I would do that? No, I don't. I never did.
Robert, you cut out.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
It's all good.
It's the internet. It's the internet. Hold on. Let me turn off the internet and be on my data. Hold on.
Oh, you're actually on your phone right now. Okay. Well, while he's doing that, I'll go ahead and take over for. I'll go ahead and take over for a bit. Yes, we can hear you better now. But dang, I almost lost my train of thought. He
lost.
Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. But
go ahead.
But yeah, say what you will about it being in poor taste, having Magneto go off the mend like that. But if you are going to use the social commentary of World War II, you could at least make the argument that it's a trauma response and it's the oppressed becoming the oppressor.
I'm back. Yep.
There's a story in that concept. Grant Morrison just took it a little too far for conventional taste, which it's Morrison we're talking about. He's always, if he's on a book, he's going to take a concept too far and run with it. It's going to happen.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh, you mean with Superman saying dark side to death? Wait, that's another thing. So according to Grant Morrison, it's okay for Superman to kill people. Great.
No.
So anyway.
Kill you to death.
I know. Okay. I will sing you off key until your ears explode. Anyway, so
exaggerating much.
Anyway, so then you get like.
But yeah, after that, then you
wait.
One at a time, gentlemen. Jared,
let me direct it.
Sorry.
So then you get X-Men by He Who Must Not Be Named but Ruin a Justice League movie, hereby referred to as He Who Must Not Be Named. Here's the thing. Now, I have read, I think, the first 2 volumes of his run.
That was it. It was just those 2 volumes.
All right. Pretty good. Honestly, it's not bad. It has some his-isms, like the way characters speak. However...
he solidified Emma and Scott.
Which I will always be grateful for.
Yes, he solidified it. If anyone else did it, it wouldn't have lasted. He solidified it and made it beyond just... they made out over Jean's headstone.
Yeah, and I'm like, or they had the mental affair or something like that, and I'm like, bro.
No, yeah, he made it work. He shut up. He made it work, and he took what Morrison did, but then bring it back to being superheroes, as Cyclops himself put it. Sorry, Logan, but superheroes wear tights.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you will about, and this is really more fault of X-Men 92 than anything, but Logan is not that big of a horn dog in context to the point that where he's not going to be a home wrecker. He's not going to go out of his way.
No, he won't call things out, like when he says, "Which parts of grieving is this? Denial."
Say what you will about, I mean, Cyclops is a lot of things. He's a Boy Scout. He's always the de facto leader, especially in Xavier's absence on the
Superman.
field. Yeah, but Cyclops
he's taller than Superman.
Depends on the writer.
Depends on the writer.
Because a lot of the time, Superman has that issue of being dull. Anyway, go on, Jay.
But in general, I would argue Cyclops is a bigger horn dog than Wolverine ever was. Wolverine is over 200 years old. He's down for just about anything.
I will never forget there was this great issue. I think it was drawn by Terry Dodson, but I forget who was writing it. It was during the era. It was during the era where they're on Utopia. Emma goes into Scott's mind, and like it's basically like walking into a nice hotel. The door opens. There's like all the hot women of the X-Men, like there's Savage Land, Rogue, Storm, and she's like, "Oh wow, Scott."
There's literally an issue where he gawked at Psylocke right in front of Jean's face.
Mm-hmm.
That should tell you more than anything else we say in this video.
Yeah, exactly. But
right after that, we get House of M and Decimation.
Which, okay, House of M was kind of needed because here's the thing. And Marvel editorial had this issue because one of the purposes that the X-Men kind of...
It was a cheat. It was a cheap origin.
Yeah, but again, as I was saying, one of the issues that Marvel editorial ran into was, okay, we want the X-Men to be like a minority, but there's so many of them.
Yeah, to be fair though, Morrison's the one who kind of exploded the mutant population during his run.
I know that, but at this point there were so many of them. So they're like, okay, we got to whittle this down. So we get the House of M thing with the no more mutants and stuff.
And they're down to 198.
Yeah, which is not a lot. That's a minority right there.
And and until Messiah Complex, there would have not been a mutant burst. There wasn't going to be one. They even had to reveal that what we think for a moment, like, oh, wait a minute, Siren and Madrox, multiple men are having a kid. Nope, it was one of his duplicates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so exactly.
That was a total like, wow.
See,
you tease.
House of M could have worked as a standalone X-Men story in concept, but then it became line wide, and then even to the point where someone like Spider-Man, for example, got his ideal life with Gwen Stacy before it was taken away from him when all got undone, and the whole thing just dragged on. It's not Clone Saga levels of dragged out,
no,
but But the synergy didn't do the story any favors.
But Jay Heat, here's the thing though. I would say from House of M up until AVX was one of the better times for being an X-Men fan. You had Utopia. You had Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire. You had the Messiah trilogy of Complex, War, and Second Coming. You had so many things going on. You had Uncanny X-Men 500 when Magneto regained his abilities. You had just so much going on where they were just on the run. They were trying to figure out how to survive. You had so many things just going on during that point. I do think that was one of their better eras looking back now.
Yeah, it's no Claremont, but compared to what we got now, it's a godsend, if I'm being completely honest.
And then the other he who shall not be named got on board. But
seriously, what is all with these Voldemort references? Like, seriously.
There's so many writers that you can't mention their names.
Believe it or not, though, he wasn't the worst when he first got on.
Aaron
was.
Yeah.
Aaron's the one who did Schism.
Well, remember, you also had later He Who Must Not Be Named who decided, okay, so here's a good idea. You know how we're going to show that Scott's become a villain?
Well, yeah, but actually, believe it or not, again, that was placed off of what Aaron and Nick Lowe. And Nick
Set
Lowe
up.
was the editor at that
Nick
set up.
Lowe. It all comes. It's the usual suspects.
Yep, Nick Lowe and Aaron were the ones. And they, again, even when it made no sense during the event Battle of the Atom, you had Storm and Wolverine just for no reason act like, by the way, and Cyclops, you're still a villain. You're one of the worst people ever. You're worse than Hitler.
And just like that, we're gonna get demonetized. Thanks, Robert.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But then, yeah. So
I'm quoting what the book said.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. But the thing is, it's like it's so. Then you get to like, okay, so AVX, which AVX capped off this pretty dope period of X-Men, and this is where they made the Cyclops a villain.
Yep.
And, well, where they really culminated that transformation, because it's been built. It was.
It was building. Yeah, ever since Decimation, it had been building up to this.
The setup was there.
Yeah,
the setup was there.
Yeah, it was. But then you get to
and humans take it after Infinity.
Yeah, so this happens, and it does a lot of things. So Cyclops becomes like basically a mutant terrorist, and I'm like.
Yeah, because Schism was not that bad at first. Schism beforehand was like you just divided to two different ideologies, two different teachers. After AVX is when it got that bad.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially what happens is my next issue arises from the fact that not a lot of stuff happened that was really noteworthy. Then you get Inhumans versus X-Men, which they introduced the idea, or at least it was around this time. I don't think it was in the story, but it was
Death of X. It was Death of X.
It was introduced the idea that the
Terrigen Mist.
Thank you. That the Terrigen Mist essentially is toxic to mutants.
But here's the worst part. You want to hit the worst part was? Up until now, we didn't know what happened. All we knew is some time had happened. Cyclops did something really abhorrent. Like everyone was hating him. It was like the worst thing ever done that it could have ever been done. And then what did we later find? What did we find out?
What?
We found out, he just changed the Terrigen Mist so that it wouldn't affect humans, but it would still affect Inhumans. And that was it. And Charles Soules compared it to saying how the mutants are. It's like a peanut allergy.
Yeah. That's right. That's what you ought to do. It was a business choice because they couldn't make movies about the X-Men because of the film rights were sold off. So they decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. Instead of, we're going to actually replace the mutants with the Inhumans and use them as essentially our Inhumans. What do you want to say, Jay Heat?
You're half right. Technically, the movie rights were still acquisition under Fox because it's not okay. Contrary to what? Okay, I'm just going to use this as an example.
Sure.
The only reason Fan Forced, and I know I'm going to get clipped for saying this, but the only reason Fan Forced It was made was so Fox could keep the movie rights. It was a rush job, and everybody hated it.
Yep.
Even so, you can't have the Inhumans be a stand-in for mutants because it's a completely different context.
And it's not just that; it's the way they did it, where it's basically like everything about the Inhumans was in the wrong, but we're supposed to be. The writing was trying to treat it like, no, they're the people who are the victims, not the X-Men. The X-Men should just lay down and take it. They are the Inhumans are the real victims here, even though everything about it, all of their actions, everything they've done, their callous attitude made it seem like, wait, what? And they kept using the excuse of, but the Terrigen Mist is part of their customs. Last I checked, the customs involved them going into the chamber in a private ceremony, not have the gas go all over the planet.
And half the time they have a research collage or a small society on the moon. They do or at least the breathable side of the moon. They do their own thing for the most part. They're hardly ever on Earth.
And they released the mist. They're the ones who released it. It's not like someone else did it. No, Black Bolt released it. So this is their mess, and the X-Men had to deal with it. But as far as the writers were concerned, we had to be told, no, the X-Men are in the wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So you had this long period of character assassination on the X-Men, and that's like a big problem. And here's the other thing. The other reason why you couldn't just replace the Inhumans with the X-Men is because you had too much fan investment on the X-Men. Like, here's the thing. There was no 90s Inhumans show where everyone's like, because all the fans knew what they were doing. So they were like, why can't we get the stinking X-Men?
Exactly. And the Inhumans were more affiliated with the Fantastic Four anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially that fails. So the X-Men are kind of in limbo. And then you get House of X, Powers of 10. Now here's the thing real quick. House of X, Powers of 10 at the time was the shot. It was the shot in the arm that the X-Men brand needed.
It was the shakeup. I should point out right beforehand, when you had Rosenberg's run right beforehand, you could so tell he knew Hickman was coming on and he didn't like it because that era, the X-Men disassembled, so many characters killed off. It felt like he was trying to derail things before Hickman got on board, not knowing what Hickman had in mind.
Oh, Rosenberg was being petty about the situation. No one's refuting that.
Yeah, but it's so funny that he didn't know what Hickman had planned, because if he did, I doubt he would have killed off as many characters.
But he did end up going to DC, and I'm just going to be honest, I'm not a fan of DC versus vampires. I tried to get into it on 3 separate occasions. I'm just not a fan of it.
I personally just don't care that how Darkseid is showing up out of nowhere, no setup, no nothing. It's just like, where the heck did he come from?
I'm sorry to cut you off, Jared, but at least with Deceased, you had a way for, Darkseid was trying to solve the anti-life equation. He was using Cyborg to piece it together. It goes wrong. Cyborg leaks the virus digitally on the World Wide Web. There was setup and consistency to where this was a plausible scenario, even if it's just just DC zombies. There was at least a setup to warrant Darkseid getting involved.
Yeah, not in DC versus Vampire. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the other thing, so that essentially what you get next is, so here's the thing. Again, you get this really dope period with it starts off good. The idea is that Moira was secretly a mutant, and her power is she when she dies, she essentially resets. She keeps her memories though, so she's like getting reborn literally. So she's conscious in her mother's womb, which that in itself would completely make me go nuts. So then what you get is the idea was to take the X-Men off of, for lack of a better term, man's world. I'm using Wonder Woman terms, and put them on a separate island.
But unlike Utopia, it's not under the government or United States control. It's a completely sovereign place.
Yeah. So the thing about this that I was like, what is like, so it starts off and they have this great story where there's like a story that's going to last for thousands of years. And this is a thing that Hickman's really known for. He sets up these plot points and tells this vast epic story. He did this with Avengers, but
and Fantastic Four,
yes. But the problem is, as soon as they got them off the island, the X-Men writers that he was working with completely like pushed him out and abandoned his story,
because basically they wanted a safe space. They were given a rare opportunity. This was a safe space where they could do whatever they want, and it doesn't have to interfere with anywhere else. They could tell whatever stories. You could take one character and make her a completely eco-terrorist villain.
Well, as we know, when Marvel creates a safe space, they fill it with a bunch of snowflakes.
Yep.
Ah! There you go.
Yep.
A little wordy.
A
little wordy, but it gets the job done, Jared. A little wordy.
Everyone's a critic. Jeez. So again, here's the if I could think of one phrase to sum up the Krakoa age of the X-Men, it's wasted opportunity.
Yes.
That's it. Because you had gold. Because I remember reading House of X Powers of 10 thinking, this is freaking dope. Like, my God. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Now, there's something else, though. And the way he messed it up, you knew this was a bad thing. This was actually not a good thing that Xavier was building at all. But it tells you that the writers that were involved, they saw it as a good thing. They were like,
It was
oh yeah,
adventure.
this is a paradise, but it's like, no, this is a bad place he's building up.
By the way, so let me ask you guys this. Do you think that, assuming sales held up, do you think they would have ever left Krakoa, in other words, abandoned it?
I don't know. Given the recent MCU stuff, I don't know.
And by the way, Brit's on my side. She says that was a good play on words. Thank you. At least someone's on my side. You guys suck. Anyway, so that's the thing. And because what I really liked about Krakoa, because here's the thing, and comic historians summarize this actually really well, RIP. One of the things he says that the problem he always had with the X-Men is that it's always repeating the same story.
Yes.
Where the X-Men are like, oh, they saved the world and the people accept them. Then like the next run, the people hate them, so I have to repeat it. This was doing something new where the mutants were like, we don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's really cool. And then actually, they did this fantastic idea. So they had these trade paperbacks that was like for Dawn of X1. For Dawn of X1, it would include the like corresponding number issues of X-Men, X-Force, Excalibur. In other words, so you could follow every series. All you had to do was wait until these trades came out and you picked them up. I have a bunch of them. And some of those stories were actually really cool. Like X-Force was freaking dope. It's basically a spy story, but with mutants.
That's true. But there's one downside with that.
Yeah.
They made Beast worse than ever.
Oh yeah. That's the problem. They made Beast basically a straight up supervillain. I'm like, no.
He was basically the mutant Dr. Mengele.
Yeah, I'm like, are you serious?
Now, granted, he was also on this path ever since Endangered Species, but again, it's like they basically it got so bad they had to make a clone replacement.
Yeah, exactly. So now then they abandoned it.
Yep. And
Well,
decided
they
to
ended
make
it.
Moira a villain.
Oh God, don't even get me started on that. Because Moira was not a villain in House of X Powers of 10. Maybe that was Hickman's plan for much later down the line. Maybe.
Completely rushed.
But it was like all of a sudden, oh yeah, she's a villain that's a cyborg and wants to, actually a straight up robot and wants to wear MJ's skin. And I'm like, oh God damn it, guys.
And she betrays everyone to their villains because they booted her.
I'm like, what?
And it's so obvious why the writers didn't like her, because she was the reset button. That's why.
Exactly. She was the way that they could have undone all of it.
Oh my God. Mystique and Destiny were the other writers.
Mm-hmm.
They were the writers,
exactly.
and they wanted to destroy the reset button.
Yeah, and so then they finally get them off the island, and there was a lot of excitement to see what they were going to do. The problem is they didn't do anything, and they still haven't.
They're playing it safe, and I'm sorry, it's Brevoort being the editor of the book. What do you expect?
And I'm like, I get that you want to play it safe because Krakoa got really controversial at the end. I get it. But you also have to take some swings because this IP is in the gutter again. Honestly, here's the thing. X-Men is back to the place it was in immediately before House of X Powers of 10 when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Boring. Stale.
Yeah. And Robert, you have told me itself, what's worse than bad?
Boring.
Exactly.
Boring is worse than bad. Now, if there's one thing I am liking, in the recent X-Man hunt, they finally brought back Ileandra, but I'm positive that's to set things up for Hickman again. And funny enough, have you noticed Hickman is now being ancillary to the X-Bucks with this new Imperial?
Yeah.
If I had to make it,
Tiamu said, do you consider X-Men comics from He Must Not Be Named to 2018 to be a mess? Yes.
It was the start of a mess, but even then, looking back by comparison, it was more of a spinning spiral.
The closest DC comparison to this would be, well, one's an event and the other's an overarching initiative while they were moving over to California for 2 months. DC YOU.
Mhm.
It's a complete multiple shelf titles, a
Okay.
complete safe space to just do.
Why did you say that name?
Right. What do you say?
He said DC, why are you?
Okay. Okay,
Convergence.
so that was more of a joke than in other words.
It wasn't a "He Who Must Not Be Named" play.
But
Here's the thing. This is the clip I will play whenever we say DC, why are you, starting now. That's what I will play.
Thank you. But during that era, it was largely a business move to keep books afloat while they were changing offices. But this era was not well received by the fans. Just about every title was hated.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones that even decently broke a profit or got decent engagement were books that carried over while this initiative was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like because here's the thing. When you look at the X-Men, here's the real. Cameron says, "Answer me this: how do you have a comic book run that takes place on a planet with tons of adventures you can do? So boring. Yeah, how do you make it boring? Well, here's the thing, Cameron. That's actually very simple to do. The thing is, if you don't take a lot of risks and you keep doing the same thing over and over again, because that takes away the stakes.
In fact, right now, they're just back to being hated, but there's no long-term plot. You can definitely tell there's no long-term planning at all here.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, here's the thing. So I checked out. I think I checked out. What's the X-Men book I checked out Exceptional X-Men, and I forget which other one I checked out. Within one issue, I was like, no. I was like, why do I care? You know why I got Exceptional X-Men? Because my comic book store gave it to me for free. So I'm not going to turn down free comics, obviously, and I was interested. But when I read it, I was like, yeah, I'm not picking up X-Men comics yet.
Yeah, again, you don't know where they're going. They're playing it that's how safe they're playing it. They're playing it so safe. You don't know what direction it is. You don't know how long it's going to last. It's just going to be spinning its wheels all over again.
Well, compare that to the way Hickman writes, because some people have accused Hickman of being in a similar vein, and I always counter with it. Yeah, but look at it in hindsight, because when you look at like Avengers and New Avengers and Fantastic Four, yes, Hickman has a lot of portions where it seems like, what is this doing? But the thing about Jonathan Hickman, he never
ending.
He never.
Sorry.
He never introduces anything without it serving a purpose down the line. That's the way you do it, because that's why when you look back on it, it doesn't look like he's just spinning his wheels. It looks like, okay, we're building to something.
Yes, if editorial doesn't hold him back, you're always going to get a solid payoff in a Hickman book.
By the way, caveat. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying, Robert?
I was saying quickly to Tevya. By the way, Tevya, Jared and I talked about that before the stream started.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay.
Finish what you were saying, Jay Heat.
Okay. What's the best way? Because if I'm going to make a direct comparison to how stale X-Men has become, it would be the Teen Titans in terms of being an IP. Now you have Titans, you have Nightwing, you have all this and that, but in terms of Teen Titans, after Teen Titans Academy with he did an Alan Scott Green Lantern miniseries. I forget the guy's name.
Tim Sheridan.
Thank you.
By the way,
the psychos just keep getting younger.
Thank you.
When do you play that?
Thank you. Teen Titans Academy first would have been a lot better as an anthology book, not an ongoing. You changed the structure, and a lot of people would have at least tolerated it.
Worst part was, of course, the Red X, where he kept teasing about we're going to reveal who he is, and then it's like, oh no, the whole point of him is the mystery.
If you wanted to respect the original showrunner who created Red X, that's fine, but don't use it as a cop out when your mystery ended up bland and predictable.
Exactly, and then it's like, oh wait, that wasn't Red X at all. There's a real what? You're playing that stunt?
Yeah, exactly. Now, let me ask you guys this. Let's say Marvel made the right decision and came to us and said, Jared, Jay Heat, and Robert, you guys are in charge of fixing the X-Men. How do we do it? Well, start with Robert.
Okay, that's a tough one. You cannot just make them good, far on accepted by everyone. That's just going too far the other direction. You still need to have that balance of them not being trusted, but I would still be where they're in a good standing with the world, at least. I said, people, you can still have some people who are like, get out of here, Mutie, but then there are others who are saying, can I have your autograph? I put them in that middle ground. That's what they deserve to stay. It's that middle ground of loved and hated. And then from that, I would just portray them as superheroes who are just trying to survive. That's what I feel they should be. That is what the X-Men have always been. They're always about survival first. And that's why I like the Utopia era so much. They were surviving the whole time.
The funny part is they made so I think it was CBR did a list of the worst things to ever happen to the X-Men, and literally, I kid you not, one of the points was the future. Yes, that's right, the entire future.
They're not wrong.
Like every future is the X-Men get wiped out.
Okay, but now I would say also Cameron the whole agree with Magneto. Magneto's not that bad a guy. It's when writers just like Morrison when he did it, who just ignore it. He's not a bad
here's a good example. Here's the perfect summation of Magneto. I present to you X-Men 97.
Now, the showrunner, the alleged showrunner for X-Men 97, he did a little too much glazing, for lack of a better term, with Magneto, especially that whole Magneto rogue debacle. Say what you will about that. That was going too far.
Yeah.
Say what you will about that.
But he wasn't a villain.
No. Exactly.
Yeah, and that felt closer to what Magneto should be. He's the type
remember,
who does. Yeah.
Claremont wanted him to turn good and lead the X-Men originally.
He did.
He led the New Mutants, and in fact, the only reason why in the first 3 issues of X-Men he went back to being a villain is because Jim Lee wanted, and Jim Lee was the one, the new hotness, and editor said do what he wants.
Yeah, exactly.
So
when you see all the BS that Claremont had to deal with, I am honestly surprised he stayed at Marvel as long as he did.
In fact,
I'd take Claremont at DC any day of the week. I know.
At DC?
No, wait, Jay Heat. We have Superman, Wonder Woman by Claremont that says no.
And he's done some other stinkers, unfortunately.
On X-Men, yes. On anything other than X-Men,
but I will say this. Because when Magneto went villain, did you guys read those first 3 issues of X-Men? Do you know what the reason
I did,
why?
but it's been why?
Because it actually was Magneto felt betrayed. It went all the way back to how it basically tried to make it seem like when Magneto, way back in the 70s, Magneto got turned into a baby and then came back, and that's around the time he became good. It was then Magneto seemed to be told or believed that Moira had used that opportunity to alter his memories and make him good. Turns out that didn't happen, but that's why he went evil. He felt betrayed. He felt used.
Go back. He got turned into a baby?
Way back in the 70s. It was during I think it was right before Giant Size X-Men.
I love 70s era comics. They're so hokey.
But yeah,
but
it's tied all the way back to that. But that's why he didn't go evil because he wanted to destroy the world. He went evil because he felt betrayed and used. He's like, I was supposed to be a villain. They changed my mind to make me good. I will still be a villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Justin Owens, to answer your comment, Claremont could pull off Titans, but in terms of the soap opera melodrama, editorial would have to step in and tell him to tone it down.
The way I think about Claremont, he's a more talented Tom King. In other words, to clarify,
dare you,
no. To clarify, that means that Claremont has talent, of which Tom King does not.
I would compare him to Marv Wolfman. Those two are 2 peas in a pod.
That's a better comparison, Jerry.
Well, it was kind of funny. Here's how you know that Claremont could do the Titans. Which crossover did he do, Robert?
X-Men Teen Titans.
Exactly. There you go. He could do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He could definitely do it. He has done some other decent stuff with DC characters. Not like
It's just not Superman and Wonder Woman. Oh
well,
my
that
God.
one Elseworld. That's that one Elseworld.
Jay Heat, have you read that Elseworlds?
Wait, which one?
Whom
The
God
one
destroy.
where Lois turns into Wonder Woman and then Diana still exists and she's a Nazi?
I thought that was a fever dream.
No, that's a real story, dude. It's an Elseworld story.
Yep.
I
Superman
don't.
becomes a centaur.
Oh yeah, Superman also becomes a centaur. And then Superman ends the story by having a threesome with Lois and Lana. It's
Mhm.
heavily implied.
Yep.
But Ricky B says that this century only remembers Uncanny X-Force and Hickman's Hawks and Pox were fire. Pretty
Remember,
good.
talk about a guy who's gotten the shaft from Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly. The guy set up so much stuff and an other writer swooped in and took it off of him.
And I'm going to tell you, I'm actually fairly interested to see what he does with Bruce Wayne.
No, that's Matt Fraction you're thinking of.
Oh, sorry. I
I'm about to say.
I was like,
No,
wait.
No.
He would also do well with Batman, though.
Oh, yes. Fraction.
Would you trust him with a Batman book, though? That's the thing.
Fraction, I would. I think I could with Fraction.
From a business standpoint, he could probably pull off a decent Daredevil or street level hero in general. But from a brand standpoint, could you really trust him with Batman?
Yes.
It's a high risk. Is it high risk, high reward scenario?
Okay. Here's the thing. Like I've said before,
the story would be good, but would it sell?
Okay. Can I finish?
Go ahead.
I was saying, but DC, I do know can write, like they've shown before. Well, especially with Batman, will keep him on a leash. It won't be like Marvel, where Marvel just says, "Do what you want with even our best-selling characters. Destroy him if you want. We're just gonna still rake in the money."
The closest that Voldemort got to being reined in on Superman was literally because 5G was being set up in the background.
Well, and his contract was coming up, but that was because of a stupid contract. Anyone else is under editorial's whip.
And by the way, Cameron asked, would you guys try and bring back Krakoa? I think
no.
I can answer that. I can answer that with one clip. Hell no.
No, because here's, like I said before, Krakoa was meant to be a finite idea and a bad idea at that in universe. It was never meant to be a permanent thing. It's not a good thing in universe.
Even Utopia was better planned out than this, and that ended up being a bloody massacre in the Grant Morrison run.
No, not Morrison. That was Genosha.
Oh, my fault, Genosha. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. But even then, Utopia was also a massacre by the time of Dark Reign.
Yeah, and plus, although I still say my favorite era of Utopia was that what's the word? The Second Coming story.
Yep, that was the end of the Messiah trilogy.
Yeah, that was freaking dope. But Jay Heat, how would you fix the X-Men?
Okay, like I said, keep the melodrama to a minimum and try to find a balance between, first of all, the X-Men is the type of brand and team where you don't really need the social commentary that much.
Right.
They could be more global, expand, and just, go on humanitarian efforts rather than being consolidated into the Power Cosmic and the Avengers and just roping everybody together. The X-Men are... In terms of potentially, the X-Men are strong enough to be their own subgenre, if we're really being honest.
They always were.
But I think the biggest caveats with X-Men are the rosters easily gets overbloated and expands to multiple books. And even with the teams you do have, melodrama. First of all, and not even just the melodrama, X-Men can't balance younger and older character dynamics to save their life. Not every brand needs to have multiple generations. Justice League can get away with it because it's an ongoing thing impacting the superhero community as a whole. Justice Society could get away with it to a degree for similar reasons. But rope them in with the Justice League, it's the same concept.
There's a reason. Yep.
Titans tried it in the 90s. Even before, contrary to popular belief, Teen Titans Academy, that's not even the first time Titans tried the whole new generation. There was new Teen Titans in the 90s, and it was atrocious.
Exactly, but that's why. But now, thankfully, with X-Men, you have the old generation, the new generation, and an in-between generation. People like Jubilee and Kitty, at least, represent that. So thankfully, that's the one advantage X-Men has, if you ask me.
That's fair. I'll admit to that. That's fair.
Yeah, they'd have that middle ground generation that could help be the bridge.
I'll give you that. I think so.
But Jay, you guys, when I made my statement, do you guys agree with what I was saying? No, that the X-Men, they deserve to be that middle of the road, not full on accepted, but not full on hated either.
The way you could do it, and here's the thing. I always thought that the idea of the Uncanny Avengers was a way to do it, because you have like an example of like, no, not all the mutants are bad, but you can also still have them like deal with the backlash from like whatever the hell Magneto does or any of the other evil mutants. Then it's essentially like if a good cop encounters people that hate cops because they had a negative experience with cops. It's a similar concept.
Oh yeah, I remember Havoc being someone trying to ask Havoc that, and saying like, "Well, what about this? We'll deal with them too. I'm not just because I'm muted to me. I'm going to make an exception."
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's the way you do it. It's just not a lot of writers, I think, are willing to give them that nuance, because too many writers see them as the analogy for racism only and forget that they're all supposed to be. And you know what's kind of funny? Claremont came out recently and he said, yeah, they're not supposed to be the analogy for racism.
No, that's always been one of the many analogies, but not the sole analogy.
Yes, because the way the X-Men are supposed to work is, in general, if you are othered in any way, race, gender, sexual orientation, yes,
yeah,
those are part of it. Even like political ideologies. No, it doesn't matter. If you are othered in any way, the X-Men can represent you.
Exactly.
But it's like, but then people only like attribute to that because Stan Lee had statements saying, yeah, I created them to fight racism. And I'm like, yeah, but when you go back even further, see, the thing about Stan Lee is that he changed his motivation for creating the X-Men as time passed.
Not only that, though, he was not the one who did the Malcolm X MLK comparison with Magneto and Xavier. That was Claremont.
Yeah, I figured, because like, yeah, bro, what do you do? I mean, I love you, Stan Lee, but what do you?
Because it's like and that's the stuff that when Morrison said, "Oh, Magneto wasn't a good guy," yeah, in Stan Lee's era, he wasn't a good guy at all.
Yeah, he was straight up a supervillain. But I think that's a good place to leave it. So before we leave, I'm going to ask you guys a question. What's your favorite X-Men story? Start with Jay Heath.
Oh, that's a hard one. If I had the famous Nightcrawler's debut, the one where Nightcrawler debuted in the Claremont run, strictly X-Men, or can we use solo? Can we count solo titles?
Solo titles can count. I'm good with that.
Okay.
As long as it's an X-Men associated character.
Wolverine versus Sabretooth.
There you go.
That one's always gonna have an impact. The story Nightcrawler debuted and the social commentary following that's top 5 right there. That's top 5 of all time right there. Apocalypse, the first one, but only because of the impact at the time. Any subsequent sequel of Apocalypse has always led the diminishing return, at least in my opinion, because Apocalypse is a hard character to get right.
Yeah, he is. What else you got?
Cable. I don't remember the exact name right now. It's Mr. Sinister and Days of Future Past. That was it. Days of Future Past.
Sinister was involved with that.
Yeah, I was about to say. I'm like, what are you talking about?
No, I was mentioning Days of Future Past, but there was another story I was thinking of involving Mr. Sinister. I just couldn't remember.
All right.
So
Days of Future Past. That's a perfect one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
So for me.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not going to say any of the obvious ones.
Right.
So, Second Coming, Avengers versus X-Men. I'm going to have to go with Hawks and Pox because, again, the story itself is awesome.
Yes.
Old Man Logan, that definitely counts.
Mm-hmm. Even the ending?
Yes. Wolverine versus Predator. That counts.
Are we okay? So we're counting crossover titles now.
Yeah. I said anything that involves an X-Men adjacent character.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say the I'm gonna say giant size X-Men #1 because that's
Yes.
where you really get the X-Men that we all know.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Robert?
Oh boy. One, I would definitely say the entire Messiah trilogy. Messiah
Yep.
Complex, Messiah War, and Second Coming. That
There you
whole
go.
trilogy and everything that bridged between them was just so good. Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire. That was a major shakeup, and it took Vulcan, Cyclops' second brother, and really made him a threat. Yeah, I'd have to also say Astonishing X-Men.
Okay. Okay.
I would definitely count that. And anything else? I can't. I really can't. Well, AVX to a point, but AVX I also feel like that was just the grand finale to the entire Joe Quesada era.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah, but yeah, I think those were my favorites.
All right, that works. But anyway, so I think that in terms of like Comics League, you can find me on Weird Science, and then tomorrow we'll be doing CLD. We're going to be talking about the Fantastic Four trailer. And in terms of Super Wonder Legacy, Britt and I are going to be talking about the misconceptions of New 52 Superman. That'll be another live stream to celebrate Superman Day. And let's see what else. I'm still planning Wonder Woman Wednesday. But Jay Heat, how about you?
All right. As for me, you can find me at JHeat75 or JHeat Blaze. Also, I got a Sparking Zero live stream. I'm pre-record, I should say, premiering tomorrow afternoon. Also, New Direction: Heroes in Crisis and Development. I just had to finish the script and get it over to Jared. And please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for joining us tonight.
How about you, Robert?
You guys know what my link will be down in the description. Got Pro Teaches Noobs in the can and everything. Just trying to get through some stuff. My thing's straining out with personal life stuff. But I will get back to streaming, gaming. And yeah, otherwise, nothing much else.
Hell yeah. Stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod. And Steve Trevor, Steve Never. He belongs 6 feet in the ground, covered in dirt and filth. Zois and Max about for life. We will see you later. Bye-bye. You know it's good. To me, my X-Men.
To me, my X-Men.
Jay Heat.
To me, my X-Men.
There you go.